seminar on tax policy and digital taxes. And today we have pleasure to host our distinguished speaker, Cristian Lucas. He's a senior economist on tax policy and administration at the World Bank. He holds a PhD in tax law and public finance from the University of Barcelona, an LLM from Harvard Law School, and MPA from Harvard Kennedy School, and MBA from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he's a graduate of the International Tax Program from Harvard Law School. And he will be discussing policy on digital taxation. And over to Dr. Lucas.
It is a pleasure to be here. I am very, very happy to be here, and I'm very, very excited and surprised and grateful to all of you for the great turnout and all of us and the great interest that you have on the topic and on this lecture. I want to thank the General Director of PIDE and Dr. Nadia Hassan for this wonderful opportunity. And I look forward to having an engaged session with you. I have prepared a presentation, but please feel free to interrupt me any moment if you have questions, you want to participate. And I'll try to keep the presentation as short as possible so we can foster and have a discussion, debate. You can ask all the things you want. We have already shared the presentation with the Institute, so you're free to share with everybody, with all the attendants. I mean, there's nothing forbidden in the presentation, or if by any chance you find it, the only risk of the presentation, it can cause brain damage if you look at it too much. No, I'm just kidding. But to be, this topic is very technical. And I am aware that not everybody here today is a tax expert. So I'm trying to make it understandable to all of you. But I included in the presentation an annex with more detailed information on the different tax policy options for the digital economy. Today, we're going to be talking about two things: tax policy and how that affects digital taxation. I'm very grateful to Dr. Nadia for the very kind introduction with all my degrees and titles. It's not I want to show off, which also, at least I didn't get the looks. Let's assume I got the brains. But the truth is that whenever I go to a presentation, I like to know the credentials of who's presenting, because sometimes I say, okay, so hopefully I meet the bare threshold to be here today. So thank you. Let's start. We're going to talk a bit about tax policy. Obviously, the difference between tax policy and tax administration. Today is about more like tax policy, although we'll also make some reference to tax administration. Once upon a time, this is like a fairy tale, okay? Once upon a time, what happened? Where's the origins of taxation? Tax is not something new. Already in the Nile, in Egypt, they were already getting taxes 4,000 years ago. And they were doing it on a presumptive basis for agricultural taxation based on the levels of the river and all that stuff. So this is nothing new. How does all this start? What do you need to... At that time, I wouldn't call it tax. I would call it a tribute, because there were not had not been institutionalized. But over the history, we've had some people coming over and telling you, you have to give me money. We could think that as an extortion, no? Right? Someone comes and extorts you and tells you, you have to give me money. And they can do that probably because they have the strength to do that, whether it's the power, the violence. Thankfully, time evolved, and we got to have what it's a state, proper states, and we institutionalized, okay, what are the powers that define a state, okay, a country. And we have inherent attributes of a state's sovereignty. Happens to be, you can search this, it's quite interesting, that the two core attributes of any state is the power to tax and the power to punish. And by the way, they're interrelated. So if you do not pay your tax, you will be punished. And in order to pay for the prisons, they will use your taxes. So it kind of retrofits. What is the purposes of taxation? Well, people say revenue. And I'll tell you a story. By the way, today's presentation, I want to make a disclaimer. All this presentation has been prepared with AI, with authentic intelligence, mine. Okay? That's a different type of AI. It's the authentic one. Huh? Yeah, it's no, but no, it's because nowadays I get emails sometimes. Oh, please look at this report that was prepared by Claude. And I say, Claude, do we have a new staff member? I say, no, it's AI or ChatGPT. So no, I try to make it. This is a handicraft, you know. So just wanted to share. So I remember, and by the way, second thing, all this presentation is not related to any country specifically, okay? So I'm not talking about Pakistan, but I'm not talking about Spain. I'm from Spain, from Barcelona, by the way. We have a huge Pakistani community, amazing people, so very happy. And I've been working here in Pakistan for 8 years already. So I'm based in DC, in Washington, DC, but I come quite often. So I remember, and I won't say the country, and I'm not gonna mention countries or names, but one time I got to a meeting with a minister of finance, and then they start saying, oh, tax policy. And they start saying, no, tax policy is revenue. Tax policy is more than revenue. And that brings us to the purpose of taxation. Taxation not only is helpful to raise revenue, but it can also be used to regulate conduct. For example, how do we regulate conduct through taxes? With excise taxes. If you want to discourage a behavior, you impose an excise tax, for example. A state authority versus individual liberty. That's a very difficult balance to achieve, to be honest. Because, yeah, the state has the authority to impose your tax, but do you have the liberty, the freedom to free yourself from that obligation? This is a philosophical debate that would take us more than the time we have allocated for today. But I just leave you with some ideas there to think about. Tax policy stakeholders. Tax policy is difficult. It's an art. You know, it reminds me to those guys that work. You go to a circus and they have like a rope and they are working on the rope like this. Well, something similar, because you have to make happy different stakeholders. Of course, you can say that about many other professions, but tax policy is one of them. Why? To begin with, because you have to think about your current, but also about your future citizens. Why is that? Because there's a social contract. You know, Rousseau, the French guy, but I'm sure you already had this before Rousseau, the French guy, came. It's just you have made an agreement with the state. You're willing to pay your taxes in exchange for something. And what happens? Even if you're not a taxpayer, because I'm differentiating citizen from taxpayer, a citizen may be someone that is not currently paying taxes, but still their lives are affected by how the tax system is run in the country. To begin with, because if not enough resources are collected, then the public services that are going to be delivered, whether it's education, health, all of that is going to be affected. But also because you have to think not only about the current citizens, but also the future ones. What happens if you get in debt too much? What you're doing is you're putting a burden on people that are still not born. Okay, so you also have to think about having a deficit, because politicians, they may be in the position for 4 years, but they make decisions that are going to have a consequence 3 generations from now. So you have to be careful, and that tax policy plays a very important role. You also have to think about the individual and the corporate taxpayers. Why? Because of the tax morale. What is the tax morale? Tax morale is, I'm paying taxes, I want to get something in return. And that's the benefit principle that we'll see later. Of course, if people feel that their taxes are not properly expended, then they're not encouraged to pay tax. And they will try to avoid or evade taxes because they feel it's a tax grab. They're not getting anything in return. And that's very important, the tax morale. And that's, you know, it's very easy to blame it on the taxpayer. Oh, you're not paying. No, well, what is the government doing for the taxpayers? So something to bear in mind. So whenever you're making tax policy decisions, you have to think about the taxpayers in the first place and then the citizens. You have to put them at the top. They are your clients, not the other way around. Then you have the high net worth individuals and the multinationals. Those are the guys that have the real power. Unfortunately. And as I said, this is a general presentation, not related to any country specifically. But I've seen in many of my experiences in other countries, over 30 countries in the past 10 years at the World Bank, that sometimes multinationals have a lot of power and they have the ability to begin with the BEPS thing, base erosion, profit shifting. They have the ability to don't pay taxes and shift it to other lower tax or no tax jurisdictions because they have the money. Also, the rich guys, they have the money to pay for very good tax lawyers. I used to be on the dark side, and I don't mean Star Wars. I used to be, this was supposed to be a joke, but that's okay. There's a joke that you go to the dark side. I was at the dark side because before I joined the bank, I was an international tax lawyer. So I work at a law firm, a lawyer in New York, in Spain, and I would make sure that those rich people wouldn't pay taxes because there's so many ways to do that. And that's not right. That's not right. And also, you know that those people are the ones, they're the puppeteers, you know, puppeteers that move the strings. And then what happens? They make sure that their wealth, their properties, their land transactions are not taxed. And you have to be careful with that. And then you have the bureaucrats. And yeah, it sounds bad, the word bureaucrat, but it's true, they're bureaucrats. The civil servants that do working, they're civil servants. Yeah, those are other type of stakeholders that we have. And they're good people. They're good people working for the country. But they also have, as we'll see, to level their conflict of interest. It's not the same to work at the tax administration, at FBR, if we were to give an example, than to work at the tax policy office. They do different things. And they should have alignment of interest, but it's difficult. And then you have special interest groups and lobbyists and the donors. What happens? You have certain groups, whether it's by sector, I don't know, the mining industry, the telecommunication industry. I'm just saying out loud, just brainstorming. They're very powerful. So they have the ability to hire lobbyists, which are professionals that go to the parliament, talk to the politicians, convince the people like, oh, no, you shouldn't tax this, you should lower the taxes on their benefit. And then you have the donors, because all these political campaigns, I'm talking about general or worldwide, when they run for office, they need money to finance the campaigns. So what happens later on? Then the guy that financed and funded your campaign says, yeah, but now you gotta give me a break with this tax. All these things are very difficult for the guy that is doing the tax policy, very difficult. They got the politicians, elected officials. There are very good politicians out there. There are very good people out there. But in some countries, in some other countries, you find people that the next day they are elected, the first thing they're thinking is, how do I get reelected? That's the only thing they care. So, of course, those guys have to be careful. You have to make them happy. And for them to be reelected, they have to get the voters, and they have to make the voters happy. So a lot of interest there. And finally, the creditors and the financial markets. Of course, when you do tax policy, you have to make sure that if you owe money to people, you keep paying those people. Because the creditors are the people you owe money. But you also have to think of the financial markets. It's the people you're going to go and ask money. You're going to borrow money in the future. And for you to show to those financial markets that you are willing or have the capacity to repay them back, you have to be careful with your tax policy. If you go there in the financial markets and everybody knows that you default on your payments or that you do not have enough resources from your tax policy making, then nobody's going to lend you money because there will be no way for them to recover it. Trade-offs. I love the trade-off. In life, there's always a trade-off. There's always something good and something bad for anything. So if you only see the good thing, you're missing the bad one. But the good side is if you see the bad one, there's something good that you're missing. But there is a trade-off, difficult one. There's a trade-off between increasing revenue and building tax administration capacity. Sometimes people come and say, okay, what do? We have to do a program, or we need money. You say, okay, it's very easy to increase revenue. You go, you increase tax rates. Okay, that's easy, that's fast. But then you're not building the tax administration capacity. You need to build, and that takes time. And you do not see the results right away. Because if you raise the tax rate, you're going to see the results right away, next year with the collections, and probably next quarter. But if you want to really build capacity within your country, that takes time. You have to make the investment. And it's either one or the other. So you have to choose. Collect taxes versus attract investors. What happens with the tax incentives? When you give a tax incentive, you're losing revenue. But of course, you do that in order to attract investors. But then it's not that easy. Because sometimes, to do that, you should do a cost-benefit analysis. You should make sure that it makes sense that you're giving away or renouncing to part of your tax collection to create something more valuable, whether it's jobs, whether it's bigger growth in the country, whether it's creating not only jobs, but bringing knowledge to the country, skills, IP, all that has to be carefully analyzed, because in many countries that have worked, you see that governments just give away tax incentives as if it was candies. They give candies. And then later on, years later, you do the cost-benefit analysis, nothing was left. Those companies, foreign companies, came, brought their people, and when they've done, they leave and they take other people. They didn't leave any knowledge. There was no knowledge transfer. So that's an issue. You have to be careful. Another one, raise revenue versus foster domestic growth. What is the difference? Is when we talk about investors, mostly we talk about attracting foreign investors into the country. But also, when you are imposing high taxes to a domestic company, what happens? If you pay more taxes as a company, you have less money left to reinvest. And if you cannot reinvest, then it's difficult to grow the company and to grow the economy. So you have to decide whether you want to collect a lot or to collect less so those domestic companies can grow. And that's like a bet. You say, okay, I'm betting. I'm not going to get the money now in order to get it later. Because if the company grows, then I will be able to collect later on more money on taxes. Another trade-off, fair taxation versus easy. And I put it on this slide. I have put some brackets, but I'm being recorded, so who cares? I have put lazy collection. It's very easy to establish withholdings and collect through withholdings if you are in the tax administration of any country. Once again, this is general, but yeah, it's very comfortable. Apply withholdings, you collect, and that's it. You don't have to do a big effort to go after the taxpayers. You don't have to audit the taxpayers to make sure that you just do it through withholdings, and that's very easy. But the problem also, there's another trade-off here between the easy collection and the building tax administration capacity. If you just rely on withholdings, you're not building your tax administration capacity. So we need to be aware of that. Another thing, exhaust the tax base or create new fiscal space. What does that mean? You may say, oh, no. I'm just going to stay with the tax base that I have. For example, in some countries, certain segments of the population are exempted from certain taxes for whatever reason. Okay? So you say, oh, no, let's not touch those poor guys. No. Let's just keep taxing the same ones. No, you have to be able to expand your fiscal space. Find more, what it's called, broaden the tax base. That it's a trade-off. And then you have squeeze captive taxpayers versus prosecute tax evaders. What are captive taxpayers? Are those ones that you already have on the net? Usually the salaried people. Those cannot escape. So what you do is you do orange juice with them. You keep squeezing them. But that's not nice. What you need to do is you have to go after the tax evaders. But of course, to go after the tax evaders, what do you need? Tax administration capacity. You need to have the resources, the data, the skills of the people to go after those people that are hidden. Although, and by the way, just to clarify, a tax evader is someone that is committing an illegal act. It's illegal. It's going against the rule. So I think there is the right, the duty of the tax administration to really, otherwise what you are affecting is what? The principle of fairness. You're treating taxpayers differently. The ones that you have in the net, I squeeze them. And then the other ones, I let them just go away and don't tax anything. Not nice. Traditional tax theory principles, the ones that we were referring to. You have the principle of efficiency, also called neutrality, which means that you should be able to collect your taxes with the least possible distortions to the economic decisions of the stakeholders, of the citizens. Okay? So it should be kind of neutral, the process of collecting taxes. Do not change the decisions of the economic agents. Okay? And also taking into account what are the different realities of the country. Okay? Then you have equity. Equity is fairness. Okay? And it has two dimensions, horizontal and vertical. Horizontal means that you should treat similarly people with the same level or conditions in terms of income. Okay? So people that more or less make the same money, they should be kind of treated similarly or the same. That doesn't mean exactly the same, because I may make the same money than Hamza, Maybe. Our households, we can make the same money. But Hamza has, if I may say, family, children, and I don't. So he should be given some relief for that, some tax allowances to take that into account. So it's not exactly like everybody who makes, I don't know, 500,000 rupees has to be paying the same tax. No, we also have to look at the specific characteristics of the situation. And the vertical is the fact that it says that there is a decreasing utility in the money. We've heard about this, right? The marginal decrease value of money means the more money you make, the less value you get out of it. The first, I don't know, 50,000 rupees are very important because you pay for your accommodation, for your food, but you're making 5 trillion rupees, I'm just saying, or dollars, then probably you will not take so much advantage. So what they say, that leads us to the concept of progressivity, which is those that make more money should pay not more, but in a greater percentage. Okay? Otherwise, it would just say more, it could be proportional. No, we want it proportional. And then you have taxes like, for example, they say traditionally, like sales taxes or GST here, they say they're regressive because it's true. If you go to buy, I don't know, bread or I don't know, or a computer, and someone who is a billionaire goes to buy the same computer, they're not taking into account what is your income. You both are paying the same tax. So that becomes regressive when you make the percentage. Then benefit. The benefit principle means what? It means that, as mentioned with the social contract, you have to receive something in exchange for your taxes. You know, if you're not getting anything in exchange, then we have a problem there. And then that affects the tax morale. Administrative feasibility. You cannot go and say, oh, I do the policy and yeah, you do the policy. That's very nice, but someone has to implement it. And the ones that have to implement it is the tax administration. So you have to do something that makes sense, that really it's feasible, that it is aligned. Because by the way, that brings us to a concept that is called maturity levels of the tax administration. You have to be aware what is the maturity level and what are the resources that your tax administration has. I've been to countries with very low capacity in tax administration. First thing they say, oh, I want to start taxing cryptocurrencies. I say, okay, wait. Cryptocurrencies, that's later on. You know, it's like a baby. The baby first has to do baby steps and learn to walk. And later will run. It's the same. There is a process. I'm saying this because Dr. Nadia Hassan knows better than me because she also studies this. There is all this about digitalization and the technologies. Of course, it's very good, but technology and digitalization is not the ultimate solution for anything. Because sometimes they get to countries and they say, oh, no, we want full digitalization of the tax administration. And can you get us AI? Will they do the audits? Will they? Yeah, they will do everything. Don't come back tomorrow. It's like they don't want to work. You know, so we have to take it step by step, and there is no like a silver bullet or perfect solution. You have to adapt it. And then you have the tax sovereignty, and this is an issue with digital taxation. I mean, countries should be allowed to decide on the taxes within their territory. But some of the tax policy options, especially some from the OECD on the amount A from Pillar 1, and I know those ones of you that are not familiar, this sounds like Chinese, like you don't understand it. But basically, some countries, what's happening between us is that some developed countries, now they have squeezed their people too much. You know, you go to countries, I don't want to give names, but some European countries, their taxes are super high. Tax rates can go above 50%, the marginal tax rate. So, of course, those guys are taxing their voters, and the voters are like, okay, I'm not going to vote you, but you're a politician. You want to be voted again. So then they're very smart. They came up and they said, oh, okay, so let's start taxing someone that does not have to vote me. Who doesn't have to vote me? The people from other countries. So they came up with these new taxing rights, digital taxing rights, where they say, oh, no, now I'm going to impose taxes based on the market. And if I am selling you some digital service in another country, I will charge you for that. And that's cool because they get money, but they don't lose voters. Same happens with the global minimum tax, which is a Pillar 2. And it's not the topic for today. But if you're happy with me today, I'll be happy to come here anytime. I'm always happy to come, and I'm very grateful for your presence. Last time I was teaching at a classroom was 10 years ago. I was a professor from 1999 until 2016, for 17 years. Then I married my student. It's true. So now my wife does not allow me to teach. This is an exception, by the way. But this is true. I'm not kidding. So anyway, very happy to be teaching here after 10 years for the first time. Yeah. My wife sent Hamza to take care of me during this session. So the thing is, I was saying this, I forgot. Yeah, about the global minimum tax. That's another thing they came up with. They said, oh, no. We're going to tax the subsidiaries of those multinationals that are not being sufficiently taxed in other countries at an effective, not nominal, effective 15% tax rate, which is crazy and it's very complicated. So all these developed countries, what they're doing now is they're coming up with very complicated, complex rules that, by the way, no other emerging market development and developing economy, EMDEs, by the way, EMDEs, emerging market and developing economies. That's a nice way to say it now. Have the capacity to implement. So they came up, the OECD, with these super complex rules that only they can apply to the other countries to get their money. That's not cool. So that's the problem with tax sovereignty. You cannot decide to go and do a tax grab from the tax base of another country. That's not nice. Barriers to good tax policy making. By the way, I get very excited, but I don't want, no, I'm good. I have 1.5 hours, right? I still have 1 hour and 3 minutes. That's your punishment, and I'm the state. At least you don't get taxed today, only punished. So the thing is, barriers to good tax policy making. What can prevent the good tax policy making? First is the technical knowledge limitations. What does that mean? I remember a country that that was my first mission, by the way, at the bank 10 years ago. And I get there, and unfortunately, they have very low capacity. They didn't know how to do it. And that's great. And we do that, a lot of technical assistance, because, there's nothing wrong in not knowing. It's good to not know and to ask for that. Smart people, smart countries ask for help. That's what you do. You say, hey, I don't know, I need your assistance. World Bank, in this case, comes and we help as much as we can. That's fine. But that's a limitation. You know why is that a limitation? Because I remember another country that I went to, and they say, hey, you need to help us out because we have a transfer pricing regime. I'm not going to go now to explain what is transfer pricing, but it basically is multinationals shifting the income to other countries. They say, we have a transfer pricing regime. Transfer pricing tries to avoid that from happening. But even more thing, we don't have people. And we also introduce an APA regime. APA means Advanced Pricing Agreement. That means when you are going to negotiate as a multinational with a country and you say, look, I plan to do this much money. We're going to use this transfer pricing method to make a projection of how much money we'll have to pay and make an agreement, okay? That's good. Say, well, we have a new APA regime with the transfer pricing. Nobody has applied for APAs. Nobody's coming to us. And it's a country that we know there is a lot of multinationals operating there. So we went there, and then I checked. And what happened? Well, what's happening is that they had loopholes in their law. So the key concept for transfer pricing, it's the concept of related party. Those are the ones that are subject to the transfer pricing. But of course, their concept of a related party was very narrow. You have to make it bigger because even though there is a loophole. So all the multinationals were doing like this, and nobody was being subject. And that's the reason why they were not applying for APAs. But this is a bit technical. So yeah, there is a technical knowledge limitation, but that's fine. But the problem is taxpayers are going to take advantage of that, and they're going to do tax avoidance. Tax avoidance, it's legal. It means that the taxpayer has the ability to apply the rules in his or her or its best interest. So unless you have a airtight rule, very well-designed tax policy rule, then all these, especially the rich dudes, rich people, and the multinationals, they can pay really smart or lawyers, very creative lawyers, that they will find the loopholes in order not to pay taxes, tax avoidance, and that's legal. So you need to have the knowledge. Second, lack of political will. That's another problem for tax policy making, because sometimes you know what you have to do. Here, you don't know it. But here, you know it. But still, the politicians don't want to let you do it. They tell you, no, you cannot do it because the measure that you're proposing is not very popular, or because it goes one of their donors, or one of these powerful multinationals, or simply because they think, oh, we're going to lose voters with this measure. Whatever reason it is, you don't have the political will. And if you don't, no matter, you can have the best policy making ever, still nothing's going to happen. Then you have limited tax administration capacity. That's another issue. Of course, you can do amazing policy making and have great ideas, but if you don't have the infrastructure, the tax administration to implement it, that's not going to work. And that is a problem for tax evasion, and that's illegal. But of course, if your tax administration is not able to enforce the tax laws, then the taxpayers, those bad guys that are non-compliant, they're going to take advantage of it, the tax evaders. So that's another issue. Then poor government coordination. That's another thing that happens. You cannot see tax policy in isolation, isolated. Tax policy has to go by the hand together with tax administration, but also with the rest of the government. Because you may collect the revenues, but if the other departments or ministries of the government are not doing their job, then your job is going to be very difficult, for example, to collect or do tax laws. Imagine you're collecting a lot, but the Ministry of Health, really bad hospitals, no hospitals. Or the Ministry of Education, they don't have schools. Then people are going to say, like, what's going on? And is the tax moral? Then they don't pay. And if they don't pay, you have to go and chase them. You have to go after them. And then that requires resources from the tax administration. So it's all interconnected here. Budgetary needs and financial commitments. Sometimes you want to do good tax policy. But to do good tax policy, sometimes it means that some measures can bring less revenue. Less revenue. But what happens? It comes the World Bank or the IMF and it tells you, no. We need to meet these targets and you need to pay this interest because whatever. And I'm not saying Pakistan, I'm saying any country. Many countries have creditors, which could be also other countries. China, they're a creditor, they lend money, or India, or Middle East, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Whoever you pick, a creditor. When you owe money to someone, you are not free. You have some constraints. And the same with the budgetary needs. Of course, it may be that there are no creditors or financial creditors, but still, you still have to kind of balance your national budget. So if you have a lot of expenditure, then they're forcing you to have a lot of revenue. And that's an issue, by the way. Every time we come to a country, I'm not saying here, to any country, first thing, how can we raise revenue? Okay, well, maybe what you should do is lower your expenditures or choose better what you're spending your money on, because that's another problem. It's not like they're spending a lot of money for good stuff. Sometimes you start looking at it and say, dude, you're spending so much money and still you're not helping the citizens. You're not covering the basic services. You're not delivering good. So we should be aware of that. I remember a country that I worked where they have a GDP, a tax ratio to GDP, tax to GDP ratio of, amazing, 34%. That's crazy, huh? That's crazy, because I believe Pakistan, you must be around 10%, something like that. Yeah, now these guys have 34%. We get there and say, we need more revenue. We don't have money. It's like, what are you doing with your money? So, also there is this trade-off and connection between revenue, but also expenditure and how you spend the money, because that's going to affect tax morale once again. And then you have the most important cause for bad tax policy making. This is the one that unfortunately we find the most, which is corruption and stupidity. Lack of intelligence. Okay? Unfortunately, in many countries, one problem for good tax policy making is corruption. What is corruption? Corruption is that when they're making the tax laws, they're not thinking about the citizens and they're not thinking about the taxpayers. No, they're not. They're not thinking about those people. They're thinking about the donor. They're thinking about the lobbyist, about the multinational, about themselves because they're very rich. And of course, they want to stay rich. That's corruption. You have to think in about the citizens, because do not forget, civil servants and politicians are at the service of the citizens. They are employees of the citizens, not the other way around. I'm not talking about anything. No, seriously, I'm not talking about anything. This is a general presentation on tax policy. That's all it is. When you see what is a red flag, here, these are red flags for bad tax policy. Tax expenditures. What is a tax expenditure? A tax expenditure is when you decide to give an exemption or a tax break or give a different treatment to the general tax treatment to certain groups of taxpayers. To begin with, that goes against the fairness principle. We should all be treated the same. Okay? And then you have to think, why am I giving a special treatment to these guys? Sometimes it's acceptable. For example, let's say I am proud to say that I supported in Pakistan the removal of the tax on menstrual pads that has been approved last Friday. IMF was against it. I supported it. I am not saying that 50 million or whatever million women that use menstrual pads, or 200, I don't know how many women, have to be thanking me. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that I did support that measure. And of course, that's an exemption. But that's a good one. Because also it has other dimensions. It has the health dimension, which is if you do not give that tax break, many millions of women cannot use that. And that in rural areas without access to clean water and using cloths is going to create infections. And then those people are going to get sick. They will not be able to work, but they will also consume resources of the hospital. So at the end, it makes no sense, because in order to collect some money from the sales tax of the menstrual pad, you're going to have to be investing in the health system to treat those people. And you don't want that. So some tax expenditures are good. Unfortunately, the majority of tax expenditures are not good and are not fully justified. So this is a red flag. I'm not saying all of them, but whenever you say tax exemption, try to think why. Who is this benefiting? Is this fair? They're bad because they narrow the tax base. There are some taxes, especially in some countries, they have property taxes where a lot of people, some segments of the population, they don't have to pay those taxes. Why? That's not nice. And also, they discriminate taxpayers. That's not nice. So tax expenditures are a red flag for good tax policy making. Then you have arbitrary and regressive tax rate schedules. That's another thing. This is about tax base. The tax expenditure is about the tax base. But once, because if you're in the exemption side, you're not paying tax. You're out. But the ones that are left inside, that have to pay the taxes, sometimes they apply different tax rates to those people. And you say, why are you taxing me more or less than others? That's discriminatory and arbitrary. So we need to analyze why. Okay? Because, for example, in some countries, they have a different tax rate schedule for salaried people and non-salaried people. Why? Both people are working. To be honest, I prefer to be salaried than non-salaried, because if you're non-salaried, you have to go every morning, take the risk to put on your business, see if you're lucky enough to get customers, if you're able to make it to the end of the month, you are creating wealth, you may be having employees. And just for that, you get discriminated and punished with higher tax rates? No, if anything, it should be the other way around. The ones that are salaried are chilling out, are not chilling out, but are work, but they have some stability. But honestly, my view is they should have the same. There should be no difference. There should be no discrimination. And this happens in some countries. Then threats to corrupt and incompetent tax officials. That's a huge threat. That's amazing. And we mentioned before, corruption and incompetent, because corrupt is very bad. But incompetent is also very bad, because then you wonder, how did he get there? How did he get, or she, how did he get there? I don't know. Low audit capacity and lack of quality, timely data. That's another thing. For fair taxation, you need to be able to go after the tax evaders, but to do that, you need to have data. Information is key to be able to do that. Otherwise, you will not succeed. You know why? Because even if you're a tax auditor, if your tax reassessment or adjustment is not fully based on data, they will appeal to the courts, and in the courts, they will get away. And then you will have wasted your time as a tax auditor. And finally, deficient tax sanction system and weak enforcement. What does that mean? It means you need a stick. Have you heard about the carrot and the stick? If you find a policeman and he has no gun, then you're going to laugh at him. And here in the tax world, the stick are the tax sanctions. But the problem is, in some places, first, tax sanctions are badly designed. And I've seen in many places, for example, on agricultural income tax in some countries, where it is worth not paying the tax because the tax sanction is worth 1 day of your production. Who cares? Who cares? Or the fine is so small that you could pay the fine every day and still make so much money. But then you have the second part. First, it's badly designed, this tax sanction. But second, nobody is there to enforce it. They don't even enforce it. I remember one country get there and I say, wait, what's going on here with the transfer pricing? Say, no. We have approved the related parties form, Schedule 8, they call it like that. It was a Caribbean island, okay? I'm not going to say the name, but a Caribbean island, very nice. And I say, and what's going on? Say, how many people did you put tax sanctions? No tax sanctions. Okay, so how do you expect people to comply? People, I'm sorry to say this, I'm not a huge believer on human nature. I believe that we need some incentives sometimes. So it's a stick. Okay, so it's the same way that I say that the state has to deliver. I also think the citizens have to deliver their share. We have to be fair on both sides. And if you don't deliver, because you know what? It's not only not fair to the state, it's especially not fair to your city colleagues, to your other fellow citizens. Because the fellow citizens are paying their taxes and you're like the smart one. Hey, I'm here, I'm getting a free lunch. No, that's not cool. You know, we have to be solidar as a country. Okay? Interplay of tax notions. This is very important. I know how many people are, well, it's okay, I'll just be very basic. I didn't want to go into that. But there are two types of taxation: residence taxation, source taxation. Residence taxation is the connection to the person. So if you live in a country, if you reside in the country, you have to pay taxes. But also sometimes, even if you do not live in the country, if you get money, income, wealth out of a country, you also pay a tax. So that's the difference, source and residence taxation. Then resident and non-resident is related to that. You know, residents are subject to residence taxation, and non-residents are subject only to source taxation from other countries. Clear? No. Then you have domestic and foreign income, which is related because it's domestic for the resident and it's foreign income also for the resident. The resident has to pay taxes usually on both the domestic income and the foreign income. That's usually how it works, okay? And then you have worldwide versus territorial system. What does that mean? If you're a resident, usually you pay worldwide system. However, there are some countries, okay, and this I can say because it's nothing bad, it's public out there. Panama, for example, is a country that has a territorial system, which means you're a resident of Panama, you live in Panama, but you only pay for the income, for the domestic income, for the income of Panama. So if you have income from other countries in Panama, you don't have to pay on those. So in Panama, you only pay for domestic income, not for foreign income, because that's a territorial system. Okay? Then you have active and passive income. What is that? Active income is income that to be generated, you have to work. So the person has to do something. That would be business income, employment income. Okay? The person has to do something to get that income. And then you have passive income. What is passive income? It's income that is generated by itself from income. For example, you have a bank deposit. It will give you interests. So the interest, which is income, is generated from a deposit. It's money. What are other types of passive income? Royalties, capital gains, and dividends. Those are the four main categories of passive income. And those are income that usually, who do you think have that income? Poor people or rich people? Rich people. Huh? And that's the reason why when you look at it, passive income usually is taxed less than active income. What is that? It should be the other way around. Because active income takes your effort, takes your life. They should take less tax on that. But the other one is because you already had money, is doing money by itself. You should tax it more. No, it's the other way around. And why is the other way around? Because many times the guys that do the tax laws are the ones that have the passive income. And the politicians are the ones that have the passive income sometimes. And then we have the notion of permanent establishment. Permanent establishment is when you have to pay for the domestic income, even if technically you're a non-resident. Because we said that if you're a non-resident, you only pay for source income. But permanent establishment is a notion that was created in tax that says that if you have enough presence in a territory, whether, and we'll see that, the traditional permanent, for example, imagine today I was getting paid for this lecture. which I'm not, and I don't want to. And I'm very happy, and I will come here always free, and it's a pleasure being with you. But imagine that I got paid today. I'm Spanish, although technically I'm a resident in the US because I live in Washington. But it doesn't matter. The thing is that I'm not a resident of Pakistan. We know that. If I was getting paid here for this lecture, they would be paying me with Pakistani wealth, Pakistani money. So they will apply a withholding, and they will take a tax from me. There is a very famous case. It's called the Pierre Boulez case. Pierre Boulez was an orchestra conductor. The guy was French, okay? So he lived in France. He had, I believe, American citizenship also, okay? And he was performing, giving concerts all over the world. So at some point, the poor guy got triple taxation. Triple taxation. And we're not going to talk about today about avoidance of double taxation or tax treaties, no? But the reason is whenever these people, like musicians, go to other countries and they give a concert, Lady Gaga, go, I don't know, Lady Gaga, I don't care, I don't know who you like, Justin Bieber, I don't know, Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift goes to all these countries and makes concerts. She pays taxes on all the money that she's getting, even if she's not a resident of those countries, because she's taking wealth out of the countries. And this would be, we could connect this to the remittances, but I don't want to go there. That's for another day. But anyway, that's for another day. Anyway, my pleasure. The traditional permanent establishment scope was either you had a fixed place of business like brick and mortar, like you have a building, a storage facility in a country, even if you don't live in the country, even if you are a corporation that has been created in another country, if you have something physical in a country, they would deem that you have a permanent establishment, which is also, for those that study law, I'm a lawyer, by the way. I'm a senior economist, but really my life for the first 20 years was as a lawyer. And by the way, I know I look very young, but I'm quite old. So the thing is, for those that do law and do mercantile law, the permanent establishment is the equivalent to a branch, because permanent establishments do not have legal personality in the country, okay, as opposed to a subsidiary. Subsidiary is when they are fully incorporated in a country, but their parent entity, it's either in the country or in another country. So subsidiary, legal personality. Branch, no legal personality. In this case, the branch is the same as a permanent establishment. So the thing is, if you have a building, bam, you have a permanent establishment, and that means that you will be taxed as a resident. Even if you were a non-resident, you will be, for tax purposes, considered a resident. But with one difference, you will only pay on the domestic income. You will not have to pay the permanent establishment for the foreign income. So it's kind of a territorial system. Remember the territorial system that I told you you're a resident, but you only pay for the domestic income, not for the foreign income? That's what happens to permanent establishments. Then agency, permanent establishment. It means a dependent agent. It means if you have employees, or even if it's not your employee, if you have some third party working under your instructions, under your orders, or that they are signing contracts on your behalf. If there's that type of physical presence, what do you mean? The agent? No, the agent is as if you had an employee in the country. Imagine that I am selling AC equipment, and my company is Korean. I'm a Korean company of AC equipment, but I have sales representatives in Pakistan. It's true, I don't have any manufacturing plant. I don't manufacture the AC in Pakistan. And I don't even have any building. But I hire people in Pakistan to go to the business and say, hey, we sell AC equipment. Do you want it? You sell AC equipment. Just the presence of those individuals are agents, that they receive orders, and that they're able to enter into contracts to make those sales. That is considered also a permanent establishment. So it means that the foreign company would have to pay taxes in Pakistan for all the sales that they make in Pakistan. Okay? And by the way, you may say, oh, well, but they were also going to pay that based on the source taxation, because it's true. If a Pakistani customer buys AC, the money will go to Korea. So there will be a withholding. But the thing is that the withholding tax rates are lower than the income tax rates if you're considered a resident. So the country gets more taxes, more collection, if they consider you a permanent establishment. Yeah. Then you have the service fee, which is a time limit. This is for consultants, for example. There are these consultant firms like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group. They send these people to these countries and they say, oh, they're gonna give advice. They're gonna do consulting services. Of course, it depends on the country. But usually if you spend more than 3 months, if the consultant is more than 3 months doing the work, or 6 months, it depends on the country, then they're gonna say you have a permanent establishment. And that is the reason why, for example, some years ago, I used to work and live in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. And we were getting some consulting firms coming to Saudi Arabia to give. And what they would do all the time is they would have huge teams of people, and they would make sure that no one would stay more than the 90 days. So you would arrive one day to the office and say, where's the team? And there were new people, all of them. I said, where's everybody? I said, no, they cannot come anymore. We're the new team for the next 3 months. And then they, in order not to have a PE in the country and not to pay the higher taxes. What is the exception? The preparatory or auxiliary tasks. It means that if you are in a country, but the activity that you're doing is just auxiliary or preparatory for another activity, then you're not a PE. But that creates a problem with the digital economy. What happens when you have procurement activities to online businesses? There, the preparatory or auxiliary becomes the core activity in the country, because it's not like you are providing storage services to another company. No, the other company, it's Amazon or I don't know, whatever, Temu or Shein or whatever. They don't have any presence. So if they didn't have you in the country to get all the products, to store the products, to deliver the products, to do all the logistics, they wouldn't have a business. So that's the reason why sometimes these auxiliary preparatory activities, which are procurement activities, can become core activities under the online businesses. And then they have a permanent establishment. By the way, the easiest thing for companies is to say, look, I'm going to incorporate a subsidiary in the country, and that's it, and operate through a subsidiary. But many of these multinationals, they try to avoid taxation. Tax avoidance, remember? So there's another final thing. The traditional notion of permanent establishment, it has changed now with the digital economy. Now they're talking about significant economic presence. It means that if you, for example, have a lot of users in a country and they are providing you with content, user-generated content, or you are getting a lot of revenue from advertisement, all of that can be considered like, even if you don't have a physical presence, you have an economic presence. And therefore, some countries are amending, not the most yet, but many countries are amending their definitions of permanent establishment to also capture that reality. So, tax policy takeaways. First, taxation is more than revenue. So that finance minister I told you about was wrong. It's more than revenue. It's not only revenue. By the way, to be honest, revenue is not tax policy. Revenue is tax administration, because they're the ones that have to collect it. But anyway, taxation is the key driver for state building, promoting accountability and transparency. That's what it should be. Tax reform depends on political commitment. These are the takeaways, okay? Tax policy, this was my professor, he died, brilliant guy. Tax policy change without administrative change is nothing. That's what he said. So you need to go hand by hand. Tax policy is tax administration in developing countries. That's also true. If you don't have the capacity, you will not be able to do anything. And then there's a trade-off between simplicity, efficiency, and fairness in tax design. And Victor Thuroño, he worked for the IMF. He was the head of FAT for the legal part. Very smart guy, still alive. And Milka Casanegra, no, she passed away, but she was also from IMF, very smart lady. And she also worked for FAT. FAT is the Fiscal Affairs Department of IMF. They're the tax guys there. And then digitalization facilitates tax policy implementation. It's true. It facilitates, but it's not the ultimate solution. And it cannot replace authentic intelligence. Remember, AI cannot replace AI. Artificial intelligence cannot replace authentic intelligence. And if it comes the day that it does, then we're in trouble. Have you watched Terminator? That's going to happen. So we better make sure that day does not arrive. Let's talk a bit about this, for you, by the way, yours. For digital taxes, let's talk a bit about digital taxes. What is a digital economy? It's very easy. We're going from taxing atoms to taxing bits. Isn't it beautiful? It's amazing. That's what the digital economy is. It's no more tangible. A lot of intangible stuff. There's uneven taxation of digital goods and digital services. They're taxed differently, and there's no reason for that. Well, there is a reason. You know what is the reason? That the developed countries don't want to pay you, the emerging markets and developing economies. You know, this is like when they say, whoever divides the cake gets the best share, the biggest piece. So it's the same thing. So we will see now that digital goods are not being taxed, but digital services, yes. Disruptive digital elements and business model. We're going to see how some of these business models and elements are disruptive in tax terms. Developed versus emerging markets and developing economies. This is the conflict that we had for decades, centuries. You have the rich ones that they want to take advantage of the poor ones. And that's what they do. And they kept flipping, you know. Now they say, oh, we had the IP, we have the technology, so we're gonna make you pay for it. We're gonna make you pay for it. Tax sovereignty, all this global tax grab, what I mentioned before, the amount A and the pillar 2, the global minimum tax. We already mentioned this. Then you have an issue of allocation of taxing rights. Now, what they do is what I said. They want to create new nexus to have taxing rights over other jurisdictions. So they come up with this value creation. They say, no, taxation has to be where value is created. And then you ask, okay, where is value created? And they say, no, value is created in Palo Alto, in California, where we have all the big companies, or in China, because I know they also have. They're the ones that have the technology. That's where value is created. Okay. Some other people say that no, the value is created with the market, with the users. So there is a fight there, not very clear. And the OECD has been dealing with this for a decade already. And then you have definition of value. Where is the value? Is the market users, that is the customer, or is it the IP development? You know, I used to have, before I joined the bank, a law firm myself. You can have the most brilliant people for any business. You can have any business. You can have the most well-prepared people. And that's a mistake that people make, by the way. Young people that are here, be careful with this. People say, I'm going to open my business. And then, oh, let's find a beautiful office. Okay, they go and they sign a lease for the beautiful office. Oh, now we need beautiful furniture. They go and they buy the beautiful furniture. And now, best computers. They buy best computers. And they say, and I got a degree from, doesn't matter, PIDE, Harvard, or the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. I don't care. Beautiful, amazing credentials, and also very good experience. You can have all that. But if you don't have a customer that pays you, you don't have a business, my friend. Okay? So some people are saying that no matter how amazing is the technology, if you don't have the customers, which is the market users, then you don't have a business because no money is coming. And to have a business, you not only need a product, you need the customer with the money to pay for it. Or if it's not the customer, it's a way, a monetization strategy to. So for example, in internet, you will see they sell your information, or they sell your data, or they show you advertisement, right? Those ways of monetizing users. Some other people say, no, the value creation is the IP, is the product. So it depends. What are the digital elements in the digital economy? We have three that are tax disruptive. Tax disruptive means that they change the rules of the traditional taxation. The first one is the content. Now the content is intangible. They have apps, blogs, social media, MP3 files, all that, we cannot touch it. What is the problem? That you have your market, okay? Someone is using your citizens as a market, but you're not getting money in customs. Customs, all this doesn't go through customs. You cannot collect tariff or customs duty because there's no way to know where they are. So first thing is the content. Content is digital, it's intangible, it's bits. You cannot, as I said, in the customs, you will not see the bits passing by. Stop. How many bits do you have? No, that's not happen. Second, distribution. That's another thing. Before you could say, okay, we have a product, and at least when it comes into the country, someone has to deliver it. Now they can deliver through email, streaming, file sharing. It's very hard very hard to control, to monitor this activity, to audit it if you're in the tax administration. So that adds an additional layer of complexity to the tax work. The fact that the distribution channel, it's also digital. Not only the content, but the distribution channel. Because some others, imagine, you buy in Temu. Yeah, you may buy in Temu, and that will be the communication channel that we will see. You make your order online, but the product has to be physical. So we'll have to go through the customs, you will charge, that's easy. But when you're talking about apps, MP3 books, ebooks, all that, MP3 files, social media, that no. And then the automation, the search engines. Traditionally, in order to have a business running, you needed people, employees working. Now, pretty much everything is automated. They're not an army of employees in Amazon or Temu or Shein processing your orders. No, it's done automatically with minimum human intervention. And that's also an issue for tax purposes. And then you have the non-tax disruptive elements. First, the communication channel. Yeah, it's digital, it's true, but it doesn't change much. Because 200 years ago, you would send a letter. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a letter. Later on, you would make a phone call. You send a telefax. It's okay. It doesn't matter. That doesn't change the taxation of that. Doesn't make it more difficult. It's just communication. Fair enough. And then you have the payment, electronic funds transfers, for example, transfers of bank accounts or using credit card. You would say it's digital. Yes, it's true, but it doesn't change anything. The form of payment, that's not going to disrupt. Digital business models. We have 10. I have here 10, which are 4 different categories. Non-user digital content models. It means that the content of the digital model is not created by the user. Okay? So for example, we're talking about Netflix. When I watch Netflix, I didn't do the movie. Yeah? Or when I use Office or PowerPoint or Excel, I didn't create that. So these are digital products that you can either sell or buy. For example, when you buy an MP3 file, and then you have it for you forever. Or you download a movie. You can watch it as many times as you want. It's yours. But you also can license it. For example, software. You are not the owner of Office. Microsoft tells you have a 1-year license or 5-year license to use this software, but it's not yours. And then you have subscription, which will be the case of Netflix. You do monthly subscriptions, and then you pay as you go. That's fine. 3 different models that give you 3 different things. Then you have regulated virtual activities. This is very interesting because what they do, the digital economy, is to overpass, escape in a way, the regulations of countries by providing certain activities or services that if they were provided from the country, they would have to meet a lot of regulations. But if, for example, you do gambling, then you can do gambling from companies that are in the UK, in the Cayman Islands, in some other jurisdictions, and you just connect, even with a VPN, right? Or insurance. What the insurance companies, I'm going to say I don't care. They're evil people, most of them. I'm sure there's one around there that is good, but most of them are evil. Why? Because they take your money, and when it comes the time to pay you back, if there is a problem, because also it's at the worst moment of your life. Your house burns down. Your partner, your child, your wife gets sick, and you've been paying for a health insurance, for a home insurance, they don't pay you. They don't cover you. So that's worse. That's really bad. Worse than anything to me. That's a personal decision. I hope they will not come after me. And if they do, I'll fight them. But the thing is, what they do is they don't want to pay taxes. So all their headquarters are in tax havens, offshore. And what they do is many of these companies, they do their business from internet, or they have a permanent establishment when they sign, but they leave very, very little money. And that's transfer pricing again. It's not the topic of today. But anyway, banking, all these banking, insurance, and gambling are regulated activities. And by using internet, by using the digital thing, they're able to do it without being fully subject to those laws. And then you have e-commerce marketplaces. You know them. Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, Temu, Shein, all this. What they do is they connect people. But of course, when they connect people, the money is always some other place. Trust me, the money doesn't stay in the country. They send it to other places. And then you have the 4th type, which would be the user-related digital content. It's where the user is creating content. And that can be used to sell the data of the user. That's what we do. Why? Because you want to go and see Instagram. okay? Or I don't know, Facebook. What they say is, okay, you want something? Fair enough, I give it to you for free. But you know, there is never free lunch. Remember this, there is no free lunch, and there's always a trade-off. So if you're getting something for free, I'm sure you're giving something away, even if you don't know you're giving it away, which is all your data. And that, then they sell it and they monetize. Same goes with advertising. You say, oh, I want to see, I don't know, the freemium version of, I don't know, whatever movies, and I don't have to pay Netflix because I get it for free. But then they put advertising. You have to be, they cut the movie all the time. Or if you go to Instagram or you go to somewhere, it appears all the advertising. That's the way they monetize you as a user. And then you have the sale of goodwill, which is all this creates a goodwill. Okay, and that goodwill has a value, and it's a digital goodwill. It's a new type of goodwill. So these are new digital business models that are disruptive for tax purposes. What are disruptive traits? The lack of physical presence. What does that mean? That it allows you to have a scale without mass. You know, before, if you wanted to have 5 million customers, you had to have a lot of offices all over the country, a lot of employees. Nowadays, you can have 5 million customers without not even one building. Everybody's connected to the internet. So you have a scale without the mass like physical mass. Then heavy reliance on intangibles. We already mentioned this. They rely on the IP, okay? Network effect, which is the one that is used by the multi-sided platforms, digital platforms. Network effect means that, oh, you know Amazon. Oh, but you want something else, and you tell your friend, and then the one that you introduce to someone, and the network starts growing exponentially fast. So it grows really, really fast. And this is also used for other bad stuff like fake news. And that's a problem because fake news is spread very fast. Everything spreads very fast on the internet. So once again, trade-off, good things, bad things. User participation. It means that they make the customer part of the business. In fact, sometimes the customer is the business. They don't have any other product than the user and his or her data that they're going to sell later on. Or if it's not the data, it's having the user see advertisements, for example. So it's a different business model. Then you have non-physical elements, like we mentioned already, like the distribution and content, and lack of regulatory framework. We mentioned the cryptos, the social media. You know, people are using, unfortunately, internet, the digital economy, the cryptos to hide the proceeds from illegal activities. All this money laundering, a lot of illegal stuff going on. So unfortunately, you know, this is like a knife. A knife is very helpful if you want to eat a steak, huh? But it can be also very dangerous if you stab someone with it. So it's all about how you use things. And internet is also how you use things. That's the reason why I also was teaching many, many years ago, 13 years ago, I was teaching in North Korea. I was living in Pyongyang in the north, huh? Yeah. And they had limited access to internet. I'm not saying that's ideal, but those students were very straight, very hardworking, very naive in a good way, very innocent. Unfortunately, from where I come from Spain, Europe, the US, nowadays, unfortunately, you have to protect your youth, your children from internet. In fact, 2 days ago, probably you saw it, the UK has passed a ban for less than 16 years old should not access internet. So this is the evidence, the proof that it depends how you use things. You have to be careful. It can be used for good stuff, but also for bad stuff. And the digital economy is one of them. And then the new monetization strategies increase the complexity. That's what I mentioned. Uber, you think Uber has one monetization strategy, one business model? No way. I go to all countries, and in each country is different. In some countries, Uber gives the car to the driver. In some other countries, the owner of the car is the driver, and he just gets a percentage. And the way they pay, sometimes you think, oh, I'm paying the driver. No, you're not paying the driver. The driver is being paid from another country, and I'm paying the other country. So the money does not even go through, let's say, Brazil, because I'm Spanish, my bank account is in Spain, and I'm paying to a company, probably in Ireland or Netherlands, and then they're the ones paying to Brazil. But Brazil doesn't know that something is going on there. They will tax the driver on their income. Yes, that they will do. But Brazil really doesn't know how much is the profit that they made out of my ride. And maybe I paid $10 and they're paying the driver $1. So there is $9 of profit that was generated where? In Brazil, because I was riding the cab in Brazil. So the service was provided in Brazil. And by the way, it was a tangible service. It was not a digital one, it was a tangible. But the digital service they provide is the connecting people, multi-sided platforms. And they are taking all that profit to other countries where nobody knows, and it gets taxed very little. So that's a challenge. Are you awake? Everybody awake? Sure, huh? Good, good, good. Great, wonderful. Punishment is only 18 more minutes, or as long as you want. I'm not in a rush. So if anyone wants to stay after the lecture and ask questions, I'll be more than happy and glad to stay. Tax challenges. Hard to identify, value, and allocate income, business, functions, and risks. For those that know a bit about transfer pricing will know that I'm talking about the functional analysis. In order to decide where the profit should stay in between international cross-border transactions, between multinationals, related parties, you need to analyze how much money is being made. What are the business functions that are being provided between the parties, the related parties? And what are the level of risk? Who is assuming the risk if something goes wrong? And that tells you where should that profit be allocated for taxation purposes. Which country should tax that? The problem with intangibles is that it becomes very hard to first to identify, second to value, and third to allocate to a country all these things. So the digital economy creates real serious issues for transfer pricing purposes. Then you have the difficulty of tax enforcement. Of course, if the company doesn't have any physical presence, who are you going to go to audit? Excuse me, where is your office? No, there's no office. I'm just sending all the content through email, through internet. You cannot audit them, even less collect. You may say, oh, no, you owe me this amount of money. You cannot seize their assets because they have no assets in the country. And you cannot put in jail their employees or the managers because there's nobody there. So it's very hard to enforce. Then you have difficult characterization of the income. You don't know what is the income. Is the income a royalty because you are licensing a software? Or is the income business income? Or is the income, I don't know, is it a capital gain because you are selling shares from a company that is offshore, but it has a goodwill? And so you're selling a goodwill by selling shares? It's very complicated. It's not easy, it gets complicated. Limited access to non-tax data and to taxpayer info. What does that mean? Yeah, when you want to do some tax audit and the business is in another country, they're not going to send you any data. And without data, you cannot do anything. You cannot do your work as a tax auditor. And finally, there are administrative and legal challenges. Let's see some of these legal ones. First, there is a problem preventing the juridical double taxation. Why? Because, for example, we'll see it later fast, if you apply digital service tax, that's on turnover. Turnover means gross receipts, okay? But of course, the tax treaties to avoid double taxation are only on income. So a digital service tax does not qualify as an income tax. So it means that the company is being taxed twice, under source taxation and under residence taxation. And that's a problem for some digital taxes. Then you have the tax impact of legal structures. For example, where do you have your workforce? Where do you have the resources? All that takes. Then you have the invoicing schemes. When I mentioned about Uber, who invoices who, or Airbnb, who is getting the money? Is the host of the apartment getting the money directly from me or not? Are they only getting paid the percentage? They do it different ways. And then you have the value creation and the revenue recognition, which creates timing issues. What does that mean? Imagine that you have user-related content models, and they say, oh, wow, you created this much, and you have 10 million users. Wow, you must have generated this amount of money. And you say, okay, I should have, but I haven't. Oh, no, but you should pay on that. Because that's what the OECD Pillar 1 is saying. It's like, oh, you have enough digital presence, you should pay. But maybe you're not monetizing that value creation, so it's not that clear. And then you have some revenue thresholds that are arbitrary, but I will not go into that now. And then you have tax administration issues. What are the tax administration issues? Tax registration of foreign digital companies. How are you going to enforce that a company in another country registers for tax? For example, for GST, if they don't want to. Then assessment and accrual. of course, you have to be using presumptions, tax presumptions, because it is not the same when you do your tax assessment than when the money gets accrued for the business, for the digital business. And for example, under the global minimum tax, which is a different topic, there's an issue also. They have to doing the accounting under 2 different accounting systems, and you have to submit your tax return 18 months later on. So there are a lot of timing issues, complexity. It gets difficult. Application of presumptive taxes. Then you have the tax collection. It's not the same if you have B2B than if you have B2C transactions. Okay, and for that, you have the role of banks and platforms as withholding agents. Probably you're aware of a proposal, well, it was enacted, it was approved last year, a tax on online transactions, like on online purchases. At the end, I believe that it was put on hold. I'm proud to say that I was part of that proposal with the TPO. And I thought it was a good one. I mean, it was very innovative, and I think it was fair. But anyway, it's on hold. That's fine. But for that, they were using, I believe, the banks to act as withholding agents. Whenever a payment was done with a Pakistani credit card, then they withhold a percentage, if I'm not wrong. But that is also done with withholding with platforms. Sometimes in other countries, what they say is the platform, the Amazon, Airbnb, all these guys, they say, hey, you're going to have to withhold, and then the money that you withheld, you give it to the tax administration. So they're using third parties as withholding agents. And then you have the lack of cross-border enforcement mechanisms. Countries are not willing to cooperate. I mean, yes, there are many. Now there's the mutual agreement procedure under BEPS Action 14. There's some other mechanisms and agreements, but unfortunately, it does not always go very fast, and it does not always arrive on time, the information. So the last 2 slides, or 3 slides, come on, you can do it. You survive, you're survivors. Taxation of digital goods. I told you that they were not being taxed because there is a World Trade Organization e-commerce 1998 moratorium, almost 30 years old, that bans, they said, no, we're not going to allow custom duties on electronic transmissions. So everything that is like, for example, sound and audiovisual files, video games, software, you cannot tax that. They don't allow you to tax that. So the tax administration cannot tax it. Okay? Digitally delivered goods are exempted. And why do you think they decided to do this? Because the emerging and market developing economies are net importers of digitalized good products. And of course, you would make a lot of money from the US if you impose those custom duties. By the way, there's some studies that have been made, and it goes on the hundreds of billions of dollars that you're losing in revenue every year. I don't mean only Pakistan, but all emerging markets and development economies, losing hundreds of billions of dollars because they cannot tax this. Why? Because the rich dudes, they said, oh, I have a very nice product and I want to place it all over the world. Oh, yeah, but I don't want to pay the taxes. Okay, so I'm going to put a moratorium. And that's what they did, shamelessly. And it's fine. I'm being recorded. It's fine. Probably I'll be going home soon. So it's okay. But you don't need to be a genius to realize this. This is common sense. And then, as I said, EMDs are losing fiscal space and tariff revenues. Okay? And the worst of all, they keep renewing it. Because in the last conference, 2002, they extended the ban. Whenever they say, oh, no, we'll just ban it for 5 years. And they made, extend it. I wouldn't be surprised that I don't know if I'll have children or grandchildren, but 50 years from now, this is still going on. So anyway, this gets a bit more interesting. The taxation of digital services. Those can be taxed. Yes, those can be taxed. And you can tax different things. You can do indirect taxation or direct taxation. We know the difference, right? That's consumption, and that's when you receive the money. Yeah? Here, you're the user. Okay? So the first option of indirect taxation of digital services is a VAT or GST, as you call it, GSTS, on digital services, which is levied on the users as customers. Here, the user is the customer. It's an agreed framework under OECD guidelines, and they have a digital VAT toolkit project that you can access, and they have done digital toolkits for the different regions. They have for Asia, for Latin America, blah, blah. So all of that. By the way, I recommend all of you, or whoever is interested, or I know, if someone cannot sleep at night, I recommend that you go online and you open the World Bank Open Knowledge Repository. It has a wealth of information. It's amazing. You can find everything there for free, and you can download it. So I always say, whoever doesn't want to learn is because he doesn't want to. You know, oh no, I mean, unless you don't have internet, that's a different issue, okay? But as long as you have a decent internet, listen, there is no limits in your learning capacity because everything is out there. And the World Bank has a very nice open knowledge. It's called Open Knowledge Repository. Okay, and there you, about all the topics, not only tax, no, agriculture, water, health, in all over the world, everything, they have everything. And like the World Bank, also the IMF, and many, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge. What happens is people rather spend their time watching Instagram than using their time productively. So that's fine. I don't have Instagram, just in case you were looking for my Instagram. I had to close it, too many fans, too many followers. No, just kidding. But I don't have an Instagram, I don't have a Facebook, I don't have anything. I don't have social media. Okay, I don't have anything. That doesn't mean I spend my nights in the Open Knowledge Repository, but still I don't. By the way, if you miss me, if you really miss me a lot, you can go into the Open Knowledge Repository. There are 7 books of mine, paper publications of mine. I can guarantee you by the end you read all of them, you will have brain damage. No, just kidding. But please take advantage of all the resources that are out there, which is worth it. Then you have excise taxes on digital services. That's also a way of indirect taxation, okay? And they're levied on the business and or the users. They're disproportionately borne by low-income taxpayers, unfortunately, as we mentioned, and they're regressive and non-neutral, okay? And then we have the direct taxation. And the direct taxation can tax two things. It can either tax the net income, or you can also call it profits, or it can tax the turnover as gross profits. The net income, there are 2 options. You can go and apply the significant economic presence test, which is a revised permanent establishment notion that we mentioned before. That would be a unilateral approach. Or you can use a withholding tax. And that's the approach of the UN Model Convention under the new Article 12p. And then you have turnover. The problem with turnover is what I mentioned, the juridical double taxation that creates. And you have 2 options there. You have the digital service tax that is unilateral, okay, the DSTs that are widely applied every time more and more by many, many countries. And in a way, the tax that was implemented last summer here on the online purchase was a variation of this one. It was this, but with a broader scope, because it was not only on digital services, but also on physical goods. So if you were making an online purchase from Shein or Temu, they would charge as well. Okay, so but it was good. And then you have the amount A under OECD Pillar 1, that is a multilateral approach that Pakistan, by the way, I believe you are members. I know you are members of the Inclusive Framework on BEPS of the OECD. You have not, you're one of the few countries, only 5 countries in the world that have not signed up on the global minimum tax. So it's your choice. But basically, the amount A OECD Pillar 1, right now what they did is, what do you think was going to happen? They were saying like, we will tax where the market is, yeah, the users. And then they said, oh, so who's going to get taxed? Who do you think is going to get taxed? Who's giving all that content to all those markets? The US, for example, developed countries. They're the ones that send the right? So, but then the US said, no, I'm not paying you anything. I'm not paying to other countries. Huh? So they found a very nice solution for the US, a very good compromise, which is that they will apply this. They will apply the amount A OECD Pillar 1 to everyone except the US. Isn't it amazing? This is new, huh? This is from this January. So it's nice, huh? And then finally, you have a proposal. It's my proposal. I came up with it 5 years ago. Nobody has implemented it. So it's okay. Probably will never get implemented. But it's okay. You know, just have ideas. Huh? So people don't say I'm not proactive. So it's the digital data tax, which is unilateral and global. And it would be levied only on the businesses as customers. What does that mean? It means that if anyone wants to send their bytes, their bits, their signals into Pakistan, you would put a toll tax. And you would tell all those foreign companies like, hey, if you want to use the expressways of technology, my digital expressways or my digital telecommunication infrastructure to access my market, you have to pay me a toll tax. And that's pretty easy because any country controls their telecommunication, okay? So they can block, right? Countries can block websites, right? So what you say is, okay, I have the amount of traffic, of internet traffic of this website, and it was this amount. It was very big. You have to pay me this much. And if you don't pay me, that's fine. I block you. This is the same that when they used to have several centuries ago, kind of a license business city tax. And they would say, if you want to come into my city and be able to sell, I mean, you still have it nowadays. If you want to go and have your little stand in the market, you have to pay a license to the city council, I guess, right? A permit to have your small stand, right? That's the same thing that these guys are doing. They're doing business in your markets, with your people, with your citizens, but they don't need a physical stand. They don't even need to come to Pakistan to make business with your people. So if you're charging your own Pakistani people for having a small stand in the market, why wouldn't you charge Amazon or any of these guys? Because, you know, here, you only charge them if they make money. But the guy that is selling in a market, he gets charged the permit whether he sells or not. He makes the investment. He pays for the permit, puts the stand with his potatoes, with his fabrics, with his handicrafts. And at the end of the day, maybe he didn't sell anything and still had a loss. But these guys, they only pay if they pay, once they make money. No, you want to come into my country. You want to access my people, my citizens as users and sell stuff. You pay a toll tax, which is called the digital data tax. Nobody. You know why? Corruption and stupidity. I don't know why. You know why? Because I assume that US companies would get heavily taxed, as you can imagine, and Chinese companies. And you saw what happened to the tax that you introduced here last summer, right? It's on hold. And what happened to the amount A OECD Pillar 1 and also to the global minimum tax. They say, oh, they don't apply it to the US. So it's fine. I love the US, by the way. I live there, so I hope they allow me to go into the customs when I go back. Huh? Now, when I get to customs, they say, what did you say about the US? To the room. And they have very nice rooms where they can keep you for a while. So I hope it's not the case. It doesn't matter. But what I'm trying to say is they're good ideas, and they could be very easily implemented. So if they don't do it, it's because they don't want to. And in the last minute, it's amazing I made it to the minute, takeaway. So digital taxes. Digital economy is a change in the way stakeholders interact. It has changed the dynamics. Source taxing rights claimed by market jurisdictions. This is new. Market jurisdictions didn't have any source taxing rights. Tax gains at the expense of multinationals. What they want is to get money from the multinationals, which most of them are US. Lack of instruments to avoid double taxation, we mentioned. Low tax collection for the emerging markets and development economies due to the low capacity, because they come up with very complex rules, but nobody can apply them at these levels. An obsolete permanent establishment notion that we mentioned, significant economic presence. And finally, the tax burden shifted. Ultimately, who pays the tax burden? The citizen. So unfortunately, it's always the same people who pay. Having said that, there is an annex with all the analysis of the taxation of digital services, VAT, excise taxes, amount A OECD Pillar 1 for those that are interested, digital service taxes, the significant economic presence, the permanent establishment, and the withholding taxes, and the digital data tax. Thank you very much. And I did it, 3:30. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lucas, for such a deep and insightful discussion on tax policy and digital taxation. I would like to open the forum for questions and discussion, but before that, I will take leverage for asking a few points from you. Specifically, I'm focused for your proposal on digital data tax, and I would like to understand how we can align this proposal with tech giants, specifically tech giants who are using data from developing countries and generating huge revenues. But how can we tax those giants for taking the share for our citizens? And secondly, I will be happy to understand how you see your proposal is adaptable to the technological advances and innovations in future.
Thank you very much. Those are very good and very insightful questions.
Thank you.
As refers to the use of data by the tech giants, that data has to be obtained. And for those tech giants to obtain that data from a market, they have to interact with the market. So the digital data tax would solve this issue because you would be able to identify what is the level of interaction within a market through the level or volume of bandwidth. Here, the key concept is internet bandwidth. I can guarantee you that if you have a website, and as you know, 1 million people try to access the website, and unfortunately that happens to tax administration sometimes, what does it happen? It gets blocked. So it means that all those tech giants, by definition, if they have millions of users, they have to have increased bandwidth capacity. And the one that is providing that increased bandwidth capacity is the telecommunications sector in each country. So if you have clearly identified who are those tech giants that interact so much, and of course, obtain that data that you're referring to, it is very hard to tax the sale of that data because that transaction takes place outside, in this case, Pakistan. Those companies are in other countries and they sell the data, maybe from the US, they sell the data to a European country. So that transaction, Pakistan don't get to see it. But what Pakistan gets to see is how they obtain that data from Pakistani people. So you should use that toll tax and say like, hey, you're using this much amount of bandwidth, you're willing to pay because they pay bandwidth servers, providers, and all those things. If they're willing to pay that to the private companies that provide, they should be willing to pay the country for accessing their market. And if they don't, they get blocked. That's it, you block the website. And referring to the new capacities, the technology capacities, every time it's going to be easier and easier and easier because it's just increasing. You're going to be able to even itemize who is doing what. In the future, nowadays it's very hard to tax individuals that are doing providing digital services from their home if they don't register. Very hard. But in the future, you're going to have IP, you're going to have AI that is going to analyze the content of the emails, which, I mean, that already happens. And you're going to be able to say, oh, this guy, he's not registered, but all of his emails are with other third parties. He talks about law. He must be providing online legal services. He should be registered and pay for that. So I think that technology is just going to make it easier and easier and easier. So once again, I'm afraid this is just a matter of either political will, which may be, let's say, influenced by multinationals and by countries that don't want to get taxed. So that's my real. Please.
This is not about corruption only, but this is about intellectual capacity and timely decision making. And before that,
we're speaking in general, huh?
Before,
remember
yes,
that, huh?
yes.
Yeah.
Before that, the policymakers must understand the importance of evidence. Most of the policymakers in many of the countries are making decisions without
any
availability
analysis
of any evidence. And since we are not discussing any specific cases, I believe, so we must not mention these aspects in greater detail. Maybe we may have some time to informally discuss 1 or 2 points later. So online retail, marketplace, commissions, streamlining, these all aspects are critically important, and many of the countries are imposing these taxes, again, without analyzing any evidence. And how the leakage of information about the residents of a country is playing with the whole global economy is another aspect, which is the dark side of this web system. So with all this and with due respect, I believe there is a lot of work which we can bring together on tax policy issues, on providing data insights to make rigorous policy making, and more importantly, the evidence-based decision making. This is not about making few graphs for fiscal federalism or making all those graphs on year basis. That is not evidence. That is primarily the outcome of your results, which you have gone through for so many years. So this is all from my side.
Thank you very much. I fully endorse your words as Cristian Lucas, not as the World Bank. You know, I have two dimensions here. You see here one body, but there are two identities here. There's a World Bank and there is the person. I am the guy with the degrees, okay? I'm not talking as the World Bank. Okay, now I'm talking as Cristian Lucas. And as Cristian Lucas, I fully endorse your words. I can tell you a couple or three things. I remember I used to attend meetings of one of these multilateral organizations. And it was very fun because we would have a 3-day meeting with a lot of countries there, a lot of countries. And they said, oh, we have this agenda. We have to discuss these issues. And then we would spend 3 days there discussing. And at the end of the 3 days, they would say, now the Secretariat is going to present the findings, the results, the agreements of these 3 days. And then they came out with a PowerPoint presentation that had been prepared a week ago. You know, there was no correlation of what had been discussed for 3 days and the presentation. They already had it there. So no matter what we did there, we could have been jumping or whatever, or playing tennis. The presentation was prepared. So that's one thing. Sometimes, unfortunately, anyway, second thing, fully agree with you that in general, remember, I'm speaking in general, tax policy without information, without data, without proper analysis, without proper revenue estimations, without proper revenue projections, it's not going to be very helpful. Because, you know, you don't want to find out the consequences too late. It's like, okay, I'm going to raise or I'm going to lower the tax rate or I'm going to exempt, whatever you decide to do. And then a year later, oh my God, this happened, for example, this is real case, happened to a professor of mine. He was a consultant for, I think it's World Bank, IMF, 30, 40 years ago. And it was funny to think because they went as a technical mission. It was a different thing, but they were a technical mission to one African country, I believe it was. And they said, okay, no, you have to you have to amend your Income Tax Act, Income Tax Law. You have to introduce and make it look like the one we have in the US because we're developed countries or the Europe, doesn't matter, all the same. And yeah, you have to introduce these allowances for dependents and this, but this is the right thing to do. And they did. So the next year, when it comes to collection, they were expected to triple the collection. Instead of tripling the collection went down to half. And they said, what happened here? But what happened is very simple. First, they didn't do any projections or anything. They didn't run the data. But it was because in developed countries, people like me, unfortunately, they have at most 1 or 2 children. Those are their household. 4. In other countries, in Africa, the household is 14 people. 14 people. They have the parents in the household. They have 8 children. So, of course, they start applying tax allowance deduction, and they run out of the tax base. So they didn't collect much. What I'm trying to say is it's very important to anticipate and to really do a rigorous analysis and projections with real data. And run like micro simulation models and have all the data. And, you know, fully agree with that because without that, tax policy function is not helpful. But I must say that in some countries, it is also true that there is no cooperation between government agencies. Why? Because they're competing with their elbows. And what happens? Sometimes, who do you think has that data that you want? You're the tax policy guy. You're a tax policy guy. But you need the data to run the projections and the simulation. Who has the data? Who? The tax administration. But of course, the tax administration is not your friend. They don't want you. Why? Because you're a problem to them. Because you are like the guys telling them, I'm changing the rules, and you just apply them. And they're not happy about that. So what do? They don't share the data. So if you don't have data, what can you do? So I'm saying this not to only blame some tax policy makers. I think it's a wide government responsibility to ensure that the tax policymakers have everything they need to be able to do their work properly. So if the tax policymaker is not provided with resources, with the right personnel, the right staff, with the right information, timely information, quality information, because it's not enough to give information that is outdated. No, that's useless. That's even worse. It's better not to have any. Otherwise, you get misled and you waste your time. So I think it's a wide government responsibility to make sure tax policymakers have all the needed resources and information they need to do their job properly. And I fully agree with you. And I've heard in some countries, if you have a physical retail place, you have to pay whatever amount. But if you're selling online, you pay less. That's a problem. That's discriminatory. And that's when we were talking about business models and the tax principles. You have to make sure that people in similar circumstances pay the same. And honestly, it's pretty much the same if you are selling online or you are having your stand. I mean, you're still selling and taking risk. No reason why one should be taxed 4 times more or 5 times more. So, and you know why they do that? Because they say, oh, I cannot control the ones that have their stands. I would need too many tax officials to go and check and audit. Whew, a lot of work. And you know, I want easy and lazy collection. On the other hand, they have the internet thing, which is very comfortable because all the transactions get recorded. So they say, okay, at least the ones on digital, I don't have to work, so I tax them less. That way, everybody will transition to digital. And then I will not have to work at all because it will be all automated and it will collect without having to go after anyone. But you know what happens? It happens what is happening in developed countries, which is that now all the physical stores are disappearing. And then there are no physical stores. And then you become dependent on those digital tech giants. And you know what happens? Before you had, it happens also with the cabs, with the taxis. We used to have taxis. You would say, I want to go there. Okay, they would say $5, 5 euros, or $5 in DC. Now, what they did is all these Uber and other platforms, first they started a war of prices, a pricing war. So they were offering very low prices. So what happens? The traditional cab drivers, they went out of business. But now what happens? Uber has the monopoly. And then you want to go to the corner in DC and they charge you $20. And you want to go to the airport and it's raining and it's $100. They have the monopoly. Same is going to happen with all these retail online stores. By the time all the stores disappear, then it will be like either you pay me whatever amount you want or you are not getting your goods. Same is going to happen with all these licensing subscriptions, the subscriptions sometimes. They started Amazon. They used to charge $20 a year. Now they're already $100 a year. Now you get to send your emails for free. I tell you, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to have to pay for every email that you send. So this is a trap, and we're falling on the trap. But it's true one thing. In the case of the digital bank, it's true that they need to pay for their leasing, the rental of the space where they're physically present. They have to pay license, they have to pay the employees, they have to pay a lot of things. And it's true that then, it has happened to me. You have the digital banking, and when you have a problem, then they tell you, call this number, call the number, and you can spend 3 days in the number. Nobody, and then they're disappearing in Spain, Barcelona. Now there are no banks. So the next thing is you're not going to be able to get cash. A year ago, in 2025, April 29th, and I remember because it was my father's birthday and I went to Barcelona, whatever, long story. He was getting divorced at 79. He's amazing, for second time. It happened to be, there was a blackout. No electricity in the entire Spain, not Barcelona, entire Spain. You know, I love carrying cash, but you know what happens? You know who carries cash? Either the goons or the very rich people. When you become poor, you have to be paying credit, you know? So usually, every time less and less, people don't carry cash. But when you are run out of electricity, you realize nobody could take credit cards. They were not working. Nobody had cash. You couldn't go to a restaurant because it was crazy. And now what they're doing is they're taking away even the ATM machines. So before you could go to your bank branch and withdraw the money, they wouldn't charge you. Now there's no bank branch. So you have to go to external ATM machines where they charge you commission after commission after commission. So we're falling into the digital trap. So we have to be careful with that. Yes, there is a way around it. You can, how do you say, resist. You can resist, you can fight it. You can say like, okay, I'm going to continue buying in the neighborhood store, in the store of the neighborhood of all the time. And I'm going to read real books, by the way. You know, real books are really good because you can use them to read. And worst case scenario, you're in the toilet, you can use them for something else. It has two uses. But seriously speaking, at the end of the day, it's so beautiful to have a library at your home with your shelves and your books. We're losing that. Same thing, we used to have the music with the long plays, and then we used to have the cassettes. I don't know, maybe some of you don't even know those stuff, but there were LPs, the cassettes, then the CDs. Now everything's MP3. But the day you lose your MP3 or you lose your subscription to, I don't know, Apple Music or Spotify, you have nothing left. That's what's, you know, I'm a collector of DVDs. Just in case internet goes, I'm going to be able to die watching DVDs. Because I anticipate in 10 years, you're going to have to pay $20 to watch every movie on these platforms. But anyway, it's difficult. Any more questions?
I have a question, please. My name is Varda. I'm a research scholar here at PIDE.
Nice.
I am also a civil servant working for FBR.
Very good.
So your lecture was very enlightening in that regard. You must have heard about the centralized assessment system that FBR is currently working on.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. You know why? Because it minimizes human intervention. Is that right?
It does, yes. But for an economy like Pakistan, which has a large informal sector, and much of our population is not very literate when it comes to digital literacy, what common blind spots or pitfalls do you see in this system?
Well, the thing is, I was reading an article on Dawn that appeared on Friday about the human dividend or the population dividend of Pakistan. Was talking about the fact that every year there are 5 million people that enter the workforce in Pakistan. You need to make sure that those people that enter the workforce are as well prepared as possible. That means education, okay? Because the more educated they are, the more and better jobs they will get. But you also have to create the jobs, by the way. It's not enough to educate them. You need to create the conditions in the economy for jobs to exist, okay? And this is a very difficult balance. I'm not saying that the work of any politician and government in any country is easy. Quite the opposite. It's very challenging, very difficult, because you have to care about different pieces of the puzzle. And if you're missing one piece, then the whole puzzle just falls down, okay? So it is true that you are going to have a lot of people entering the market, and you need to make them to have this education literacy. I was reading this article in Dawn that was talking, unfortunately, in some areas, like the province of Balochistan in Pakistan, where the literacy levels are extremely low, where apparently less than 1% of the schools have toilets, where unfortunately women do not have the same opportunity access to education and to jobs than male. So all that has to be taken into account for your question about the informal economy. Because when you have people that unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to be educated, that they need to feed their families, mostly women, and still they need to bring some income home, and they do, for example, handicrafts. Those people, you cannot ask them to have an accounting, to carry an accounting, and to connect online because they don't even know how to write. So you need to, rather than push the people and punish the people, you have to create the conditions for the future people be able to access the system. That is the digital and financial inclusion. So nowadays, so many million women are working, and you would call those women informal economy. I don't call them informal economy. I would call it survival economy, because they're surviving. And let's not forget, you only collect taxes when someone is able to make a living and they still have an extra. But you should not collect taxes on the basic survival money of people, because they need to eat before they pay taxes. And I believe a big chunk, a big part of Pakistan's informal economy is made up by people that have no other opportunities, mostly women, that were not provided access to education, and that they have to survive doing whatever they can to do work in the rural areas. So I think they need to work on that. But still, I think the initiative in FBI is amazing. It will be good. But as I said, tax policy is not only about tax policy or tax administration, it's about the other ministries doing their share to improve the conditions of all the citizens to be included. So I want to make that point very clear.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful presentation. And we are requested you to next time. And as for Dr. 𝐓𝐚𝐿 Ahmed here, we requested Dr. 𝐓𝐚𝐿 Ahmed to arrange next time presentation on the transfer pricing and GMT as well. So, sir, my question here is that Pakistan also is...
That request, I will be very happy. Please channel it to the appropriate people in PIDE, and I will be delighted to come back. In fact, I will be back in Pakistan mid-September. So if we get the request on time, I'll be very happy to have another session with all of you and discuss whatever topics you decide mid-September.
So Pakistan is also a member of IF member countries, including 134 countries. And this like OECD made these, my main focus is on BEPS action plan 1, that's on digitalization and amount B. So BEPS made these initiatives just look surface level of developing countries, not like evaluate it, not evaluate through real data. It's just made on just look just surface level. So what extent these initiatives like amount B, like digitalization, are beneficial for developing countries, and is there any benefit for such a developing countries or not?
Okay. Now we're talking more specific. Remember, my presentation was general. Now you're asking questions. I answer all your questions. Now you're talking specifically about the BEPS actions. I don't know if you want to put it in connection. You said developing countries. So we're not talking specifically Pakistan, although you mentioned it's a member. It's true. There are two things. The amount B under Pillar 1 of the OECD, and this is something technical, is on transfer pricing. As you know, about facilitating, streamlining, making some benchmarkings for specific distribution activities. Why is that? That's good. That's good. I'll explain why. Because before amount B, when you wanted to do the transfer pricing, you had to have what it's called comparables. That is information of other transactions that would be similar to your transaction. But getting those comparables was very difficult, especially in emerging markets and developing economies. It was difficult. And the only way to get those comparables was paying databases, foreign databases. For example, Van Buren database. They're very, very expensive. Or the Bloomberg or some other databases. And countries don't have the money to pay for that. By the way, another problem is that you can always find the comparable that you want. It's like I'm a lawyer, and I can defend A, but I can also find arguments to defend B and the opposite. So what they did is you, as a tax administration, would spend a lot of money on international database to find the comparables. And then the advisors, tax advisors of the taxpayer would come up with other comparables. And still, it was not very helpful. So what Amount B has done is say, look, let's not fight about the comparables, because the comparables basically are telling you about what is the percentage of profit for transactions. So what Amount B says is, look, we're just going to agree on a certain window of profitability for certain activities. So if you're carrying out distribution activities, your average profitability should be between 5 and 7%, for example. And then there is no need for comparables. We just agree on that and you charge that. That's it. So in that sense, Amount B is good because it helps overcome the tax administration capacity limitations. And it makes it easier to decide how much percentage of profits multinationals should pay for activities carried out in your territory. So that's good. Then you go global minimum tax, Pillar 2. That's a problem. That's a problem because, of course, investors, if you tell all investors worldwide that no matter where they go to invest, they are going to have to pay 15% effective is a lot, huh? It's not nominal, effective tax rate, then investors probably will prefer to go to places where they have good infrastructure, where they don't have safety concerns, where they have a regular access to bandwidth telecommunication capacities, and many, many more things. So why did they do that? The global minimum tax was done by the developed economies. They say, okay, if tax is removed from the equation of investment decisions, then everybody will want to come and establish in our territories. So we will have more taxpayers. That is the thing of President Trump. He says, let's make America great again. Let's bring all the factories and the workers back to America. That's what they want to do. And by the way, they were already doing this because the equivalent of the global minimum tax has already existed for many years in the US for US companies, which is the GILTI Act. And what they do is they charge for whatever is not being charged abroad from the subsidiaries. So these developed countries say, oh, no, we want that multinationals make their decisions based on anything except tax. But of course, then developing countries are not attractive. So unfortunately, many times, what only tool that developing countries have available to attract investors is giving away taxation, is reducing the taxes. They lowered the taxes. So in that sense, I think global minimum tax is not good for developing countries, but I obviously think it's not good for anyone because it's also a tax grab on the tax sovereignty of other countries. However, it is also true there is one thing called the race to the bottom. Race to the bottom means if all the countries start competing for the investors, then they say, no, come to my country, I'll give you a 5% rate. No, come to my country, I'll give you a 0% rate. And then, no, come to my country, I'll give you 0% rate for 5 years. And then you end up seeing, as I've seen in many countries, tax holidays for 50 years for no reason and no benefit for the country. So we have to be careful with that as well, okay? There is always a trade-off. There are always two sides to the problem. But the global minimum tax, it has to be carefully analyzed, especially when, when you see that there is a proposal where the proposal comes from the OECD, okay? The biggest share of financing of OECD comes from the US, okay? So OECD is greatly funded by the US. And then they come up with a proposal, and then the US says, I'm out. Then you may want to consider why they are out, okay? So anyway, it's complex. Right now, if you ask me about Pakistan, I think Pakistan has bigger fish to fry than the global minimum tax. And I think Pakistan, at this stage, they did very well not signing for the global minimum tax. And I'm speaking as Cristian Lucas, not as the World Bank. Remember, you're seeing Cristian Lucas. If I was with the World Bank, I would be taller, more handsome, and slimmer. No. I'm just Cristian Lucas. Okay, good.
Hello, this is Dr. Idris Masood. I'm from the Area Study Center, University of Peshawar. I'm a planning economist and a PhD in economics. My question, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Lucas. It was a very inspiring talk. Welcome. My question is, when will the global digital economy reach that stage of maturity when we can apply the digital taxation to it? And it's because I feel that this is a question of simultaneous optimality being achieved at one point of time. And then which would be the international regulating authority for this? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. To the first part, you should implement digital tax tools, taxes, whenever you have the capacity to implement them. If you do not have the capacity, then you may come up with a great idea, but if, for example, banks, financial entities, let's just assume, are not willing to share information because of bank secrecy, or they say that they're not willing to withhold on your behalf, or the digital platforms, you don't have any way to block them because you need to have some way, some carrot and stick. You need the stick. So if you're not willing to take or don't have the capacity or the ability to take those measures to implement the tax, don't do it, because it will be a failure. You will look bad in front of the citizens, and also it will be unfair because there's always a part of the population that does not comply. But it's true, there is also a good part of the population that do comply. They're good people. So you don't want only the good people complying. You want to have also the tools to go after the ones that don't comply. And in the digital economy, going after them is much more difficult than in the traditional economy. So you need to make sure that you have the right tools and capacities to implement it. And if we were to have a global authority, that's what I talk about in my book, which is the Global Internet Tax Agency that I suggest, that was already suggested something similar by Vito Tanzi, an IMF director, very smart guy, 3 decades ago, not related to digital, but related to taxes, which is you would need to have some independent organization that would be able to allocate in fairness all the taxing rights across countries. But that's not easy at all. And unfortunately, given the current situation in the world and how it's so difficult to fix issues, you may think that war is a problem, but taxes, that's even a bigger problem. You know, countries are not willing to give away or compromise with taxation. So that's a long-term project. Maybe will happen, but may take some time for that. And I see there is a question.
Yes,
what policies should we have to adopt in Pakistan?
Specifically for digital policy.
For digital. Honestly, first thing, I think the tax administration should talk to the telecommunication authority and see what information the telecommunication authority has. You know, once again, we go back to data. Before we make a policy decision of introducing digital taxes, we should have the data. And the data here is from the Telecommunication Authority of Pakistan, or I don't know if it's NADRA, or I don't know who's the one that...
NADRA.
Is NADRA?
They need
Yeah.
NADRA's help.
Okay, so NADRA. So
And they will get one.
okay. So once you have the information, then you can do projections, and you also need to not only talk to NADRA that has information, but you need to talk also to the judiciary, to the courts, to the Supreme Court, because here, I believe, I understand, I may be wrong. In this country, every time there's any new tax, they just go to the court, to the Supreme Court, and then they stay there for years. And that's a problem, because then it's not efficient. So before you come up, it's not only that the tax policy office has to talk to FBR or to NADRA or to the provinces or to whoever. They also have to talk to the courts, because they should go and say, look, let's make a consultation. Can we do this? Yes or not? Are you going to support us? Yes or no? Okay, let's do it. Because if the next day they pass the digital tax or whatever, it's going to be taken to court, they're going to challenge it in court, and it's going to stay there, then let's not waste our time. So this is a team playing exercise, whole wide government-wide exercise. And I am afraid, unfortunately, I'm not going to talk now about Pakistan, but I'm afraid in many countries, not Pakistan, many countries, different ministries or politicians or human beings or whatever, they're very territorial. So they go and they do like this, and they don't share anything. Oh, I'm not sharing just in case this guy takes my job next month. Oh, I'm not sharing just in case they say I did something wrong and I get fired. Or I don't know. I don't know why they do it in other countries. But if there is no across-government agencies collaboration, this doesn't work. And unfortunately, it's not only specific to countries, it's specific to companies, and it's specific to everything. Because, and I'm sorry, this is not related to tax, but I don't care. It's about the sense of community. And every time we have less and less sense of community at all levels, in all countries. I can talk about my country. I'm from Barcelona, Catalonia. They want to be independent from Spain, but they're very solidary. They care a lot about the kids in Gaza, which is fine. I love the kids in Gaza, and I love the kids in Cuba, and I love the kids in Alaska. I love everybody. But if you care about people that are thousands of kilometers away, but you don't want to help your neighbor across the provincial border, then we have a problem. What type of sense of community do we have? And I believe Pakistan, you also have provinces, I believe, and you have your things and your issues. And can only say about tax, but I see that, for example, provinces and the federal government, they're always fighting about the GST. Because federal has the goods, the provincials have the services, but then they fight about what is a good, what is a service. I want to take this, I want to take that. The moment you stop thinking as a community, and you just think as an individual or as a department or ministry, then you lost. Everything is lost because there is no collaboration. Thank you so much. I don't know if there was glue on the chairs. I'm sorry if that's the case. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure having you all here. I very much enjoyed this session, and I'm available for any future sessions and topics you may be interested. And thank you. And I'm glad to see that Pakistan at least PIDE is doing their share in bringing educated people and motivated people. And I think you'll be a great country with people like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas, for having a very enlightening discussion with us. And while we conclude this, I would prefer many scholars to read this proposal by Dr. Lucas and work on their research topics in that area. And we can catch up with you in September, as you suggested.
Absolutely.
And I'm very thankful to all scholars and our distinguished faculty and researchers and online audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.